The sun had already begun to set on the quiet streets of the small town. The golden light bathed the houses, casting long shadows over the town that had seemed untouched by time. On the edge of town, tucked away behind a row of thick trees and overgrown bushes, stood a small house. It had seen better days, but it was still standing. Inside, 80-year-old Martha Jenkins sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the wild garden that surrounded her home. The garden used to be her pride and joy. Her late husband, James, had taken meticulous care of it for years. He'd plant flowers, trim the hedges, and keep the lawn perfectly manicured. But since his passing a year ago, everything had changed. Martha was left alone in the house they had once shared, and the garden became a symbol of the life she'd lost. Martha had tried to keep up with the garden, of course. She wasn't the same gardener James had been, but she thought she could manage. But as the days passed, the weeds grew taller, the flowers began to wilt, and the lawn stretched further out of control. Some days, it was all she could do to get out of bed. Grief had taken its toll on her body, and she was exhausted from the constant ache in her chest. The house felt so empty now, so quiet. Sometimes, she didn't even have the energy to walk to the mailbox, much less take care of the garden. One morning, as she sipped her tea at the kitchen table, a letter arrived. It was from the city, another reminder of the world that kept moving, even though Martha felt like she was stuck in time. She opened the letter slowly, her hands shaking as she read the words. "You are in violation of city ordinances. Your lawn exceeds the 10-inch height limit. A fine of $25 will be assessed unless the issue is addressed within the next 2 weeks." Martha stared at the letter, her heart sinking into her stomach. A fine? For what? For something so trivial? To most people, $25 wouldn't be much. But for Martha, living on a fixed income, it might as well have been $1,000. She could barely afford her bills, let alone the added expense of fixing her lawn. The thought of paying a fine seemed impossible. She didn't even know where she would find the energy to do it. For the past year, she had been trying to survive without James by her side, but every day had felt like she was walking through fog. She hadn't even noticed how much the grass had grown. $25, Martha muttered to herself, her voice barely a whisper. She set the letter down, her hand shaking. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. It wasn't just the fine. It was the reminder that the world kept moving forward, that people had expectations. It was a reminder that the world had little patience for grief. The next morning, Martha gathered the courage to go to the courthouse. She knew she had to at least try to explain her situation. She grabbed her cane, took a deep breath, and slowly made her way out the door. The walk to the courthouse was long. It was only a few blocks, but every step felt heavier than the last. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows as she made her way down the street. People passed her by, some barely noticing her, others giving her a polite nod. But none of them really looked at her. None of them saw the weight she carried in her heart. When she finally reached the courthouse, Martha was greeted by the cold, sterile atmosphere of the building. She shuffled through the metal detectors and waited in line. When it was her turn, she gave the clerk her name, and she was directed to courtroom 4B. As she walked into the courtroom, she felt small, insignificant. The room was filled with people waiting for their turn, but no one noticed the frail old woman walking in. She found a seat in the back and waited her turn, her hands trembling as she clutched her cane. It wasn't long before a voice called her name. Martha Jenkins. She stood up slowly, feeling the eyes of the room on her as she made her way to the front. Judge Carter, a man in his 50s with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, looked up from his papers. "State your name." "Martha Jenkins, Your Honor," she said softly, her voice wavering. Judge Carter glanced at her for a moment, then looked down at the paperwork in front of him. "You've been cited for failure to maintain your property. Your lawn exceeds the city ordinance's height limit. How do you plead?" Martha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. I didn't mean to, Your Honor. My husband passed away last year. I've been trying to take care of things, but it's hard." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That's not an excuse. The city sent you multiple notices. You should have taken care of this sooner. Martha swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I didn't know. I didn't open the mail. I've been grieving. Judge Carter's expression didn't soften. That's not the city's problem. Everyone has problems, Mrs. Jenkins. You'll be required to pay a fine. $25. You have 1 week to pay it. Martha's heart sank. It wasn't just the fine. It was the way the judge spoke to her, the way he dismissed her grief so easily. She nodded, standing up slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. The room seemed to close in on her as she walked out, her back hunched from the weight of the humiliation. The judge didn't even look up as she left. Back at home, Martha sat in the quiet of her living room, the letter still in her hands. The fine seemed so trivial, yet it represented everything she couldn't keep up with, the bills, the paperwork, the loneliness. She hadn't been able to take care of the things that once brought her joy. And now, even the smallest thing, her garden, was a reminder of how far she had fallen. But what she didn't know was that something was happening beyond her understanding. A young woman named Emily, who worked as a court clerk, had been watching the whole exchange. She had seen how the judge treated Martha, how her voice trembled, how her hands shook. And it bothered her. It bothered her deeply. Emily decided to do something about it. Late that night, after work, she edited a short video clip of Martha's court appearance and posted it online with the caption, "This is how we treat our elderly today. Is this what justice looks like?" By morning, the video had gone viral. People across the country were outraged. Comments poured in. How could the judge be so cruel? Shame on the system for treating an elderly woman like this. Someone needs to help her. The video sparked a wave of support for Martha. Donations began to pour in from strangers. Volunteers from all over the town offered to mow her lawn, deliver groceries, and simply visit her. People cared, and they were not going to let her face this alone. The next few days were overwhelming for Martha. She woke up to a knock at her door. It was Lisa, a neighbor from down the street, holding a lawnmower. "I saw your story online," she said with a warm smile. "I'm here to mow your lawn. I know it's been a tough year for you." Martha's eyes welled up with tears. She had never expected anything like this. The kindness was too much for her to bear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." Lisa smiled softly. "It's the least I can do. You're not alone, Mrs. Jenkins. You're part of this community, and we're here for you." The next few days were filled with similar gestures. Neighbors came by to offer help. Some brought casseroles. Others brought flowers. It was as if the entire town had decided to take care of Martha, and the love she felt from all of them overwhelmed her. By the end of the week, Martha had more help than she could ever have imagined. And the $25 fine that had seemed like such a burden? It was nothing compared to the kindness that had been shown to her. But what Martha didn't know was that the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days that followed Martha's viral story felt like a blur. People came and went, offering kindness in small and big ways, filling her house with an energy she hadn't felt in years. But even as the world around her began to show her kindness, she couldn't shake the sense that she was somehow different now, no longer the quiet, unnoticed widow. People had started to see her, but she still couldn't escape the feeling of loneliness that clung to her heart. It was during one of these quiet moments, when the house felt empty again after a flurry of visitors, that Martha sat down at her kitchen table, staring at the pictures of James. They were everywhere, on the mantel, the side tables, even tucked away in old photo albums. The thought of him still brought a fresh wave of grief, and sometimes she would catch herself whispering his name as if he might hear her. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily, the young woman who had posted the video. "Hi, Martha. I just wanted to check in on you. I hope you're doing okay. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're all rooting for you." Martha blinked back tears as she read the message. How could a stranger be so kind? She had never met Emily in person, but somehow, the message felt like a lifeline. For the first time in what felt like forever, Martha typed back a reply. Thank you, Emily. You've made me feel seen, something I didn't know I needed. Emily responded almost immediately. Asterisk, you deserve to be seen, Martha. And I hope the community continues to show you how much you matter. Martha smiled faintly. The words were comforting, but there was still a small voice in her head reminding her that this kindness might only be temporary. She was an elderly widow, after all. The world moved on, and she would be left behind. The next day, a large envelope arrived at Martha's doorstep. It was from the city. Her heart skipped a beat as she tore it open, expecting some kind of follow-up regarding the fine. Instead, the letter inside was a formal invitation to a town meeting. The letter read, "We would like to invite you to speak at the upcoming city council meeting. We believe your story has inspired many in our community. Your courage in sharing your struggles has helped us all understand the importance of kindness and support for the elderly. Please join us." Martha's hands trembled as she read the words again. Speak? What would she say? She wasn't a public speaker. She had spent most of her life quietly observing, never asking for attention. But the thought of facing the people who had supported her, who had shown her so much kindness, made her pause. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the invitation, her thoughts swirling. Should she go? Should she allow herself to be seen, not just as the grieving widow, but as someone who had been carried by the kindness of others? She picked up her pen and began writing, not sure what she would say but feeling compelled to try. I wasn't always a person who asked for help. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want people to pity me. But when I received that fine, when I thought I had no one left to turn to, I was reminded that we're all in this together. I never expected that the kindness of strangers would change my life. The day of the city council meeting arrived. Martha dressed carefully, wearing her best dress, the one James had bought for their 50th anniversary. She wore a simple cardigan over it and a pair of black shoes she hadn't worn in years. She looked at herself in the mirror before she left the house, taking in the face staring back at her. She didn't see the frail, helpless woman she had once been. No, today, she saw a woman who had survived. She had a story worth sharing. The hall was filled with people. Some of them were familiar faces, neighbors, volunteers, even Emily, who waved at Martha from the front. But as Martha walked to the podium, she could feel the weight of the room's gaze. It wasn't a judgmental gaze. No, it was full of warmth. But still, it felt like 1,000 eyes were on her, waiting. The mayor stood beside her, offering her a reassuring smile. "You have the floor, Mrs. Jenkins. Please, share with us your story." Martha stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Her heart raced, her palms felt clammy, but she steadied herself. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes catching Emily's, and that was enough. With a shaky voice, Martha began. "My name is Martha Jenkins. I've lived in this town my entire life. My husband, James, and I built a life here. We raised a family. We planted a garden. We loved each other for 50 years. But then, he passed away. And with that, I didn't know how to keep going. I didn't know how to do the things I once did." She paused, taking a deep breath. The words were coming out more easily now. The support of the people around her was carrying her forward. The lawn, my garden, it became a symbol of what I couldn't do anymore. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have imagined, was how many of you would reach out to help me. Strangers, neighbors, people I didn't even know. You mowed my lawn, brought me food, visited me when I thought I was alone. And because of all of you, I realized something important. I am not alone. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked out at the crowd. We are all in this together. We all need each other, and we don't have to go through things alone. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I do know this: kindness changes everything. The room was silent for a moment, and then the applause began. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was real. People stood up, clapping, some wiping their eyes. The mayor, too, stood and clapped, his face full of admiration. Martha stepped down from the podium, her heart still pounding, but now it was filled with something different: hope. She had shared her story, and in doing so, she had reminded everyone in that room of something important. We need to take care of one another. As Martha left the city council meeting that night, she felt lighter. The weight of her grief still sat with her, but the kindness she had received had changed her. She had begun to heal, and as she walked home, she could almost hear James's voice in her mind. "You've always been strong, Martha. And now, it's your turn to share that strength with others." Martha smiled faintly, a quiet promise in her heart. She would share that strength. She would continue to live with purpose, surrounded by the love and kindness of the community she had once thought she didn't belong in. The next morning, Emily texted her again. "You were amazing last night, Martha. People are still talking about your speech." Martha replied, "Thank you, Emily. It wasn't just me. It was all of us." And in that moment, Martha knew she was no longer invisible. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It had become part of something bigger, part of a movement of kindness and community. And this was only the beginning. Martha had become a symbol, a reminder of what it meant to be seen, to be cared for. But she still couldn't shake the nagging thought that one day, the kindness would fade. That's what always happened, right? People are nice for a while, but then life moves on. She tried to push the thought away, but deep down, it was always there. Yet, the world around her seemed to prove her wrong. Every morning, she opened her door to find fresh flowers on the porch, or a loaf of homemade bread from a neighbor. At the grocery store, she was no longer just a face in the crowd. People stopped to say hello, to check on her. The same people who had once barely acknowledged her presence now made her feel like she was a part of something. One afternoon, as Martha was sitting on her front porch, sipping tea, Emily came by with a basket of fresh fruit. She had become one of Martha's closest friends, a bright light in her life. "You're becoming a bit of a local celebrity," Emily said, grinning as she sat down beside Martha. Martha chuckled softly. "I never wanted to be a celebrity, Emily. I just wanted to get by." "You've done more than just get by," Emily said, her voice serious now. "You've inspired people, Martha. You've shown them that it's never too late to start living again, to find joy in the little things." Martha looked at her, surprised. "I never thought of it that way." Emily leaned in, her eyes sparkling. "You've given all of us a gift. You've reminded us that kindness is powerful. It can change lives." Martha smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that she hadn't realized how much of an impact her story had made. How much the community had been transformed by it. It wasn't just her story anymore. It had become everyone's story. The next big step in Martha's journey came unexpectedly. A few weeks after the city council meeting, the local newspaper reached out. They wanted to do a feature on her, an in-depth story about her life, her struggles, and how the community had rallied around her. It was a big deal, but Martha felt a twinge of anxiety at the thought of being in the spotlight once again. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she admitted to Emily one evening over coffee. "I've never been one to seek attention." "You're not seeking attention, Martha," Emily reassured her. "You're sharing your story, and your story is one that can help others who feel alone, who think they have no one." Martha thought about it long into the night. Was she ready to share more? To reveal even deeper layers of her grief? The truth was, she wasn't sure. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that if sharing her story could help even one person feel seen, it would be worth it. The following week, the article was published. The headline read, Martha Jenkins. From Grief to Gratitude, a story of hope and kindness. The story itself was a beautiful tribute to the community's support of Martha, but it was more than just a recounting of events. It was a call to action, a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference in someone else's life. The response was overwhelming. Martha received hundreds of letters and messages from people across the country. Some shared their own stories of loneliness and loss. Others simply thanked her for reminding them of the importance of reaching out to those in need. She was humbled, but she knew that her journey wasn't over yet. There was still so much more to be done. A few months later, the community organized a celebration in Martha's honor. It was a gathering to thank her for everything she had done and for everything she had become, a symbol of strength, of resilience, of kindness. The event took place at the town square, and it was filled with music, food, and laughter. People of all ages showed up, and for the first time in a long while, Martha felt like she truly belonged. As she stood at the front of the crowd, looking out at all the faces, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just a widow anymore. She was a friend, a neighbor, a part of something bigger than herself. And that was enough. The mayor took the stage, his voice filled with emotion. Martha Jenkins has taught us all a valuable lesson. In a world that can sometimes feel so disconnected, she has reminded us that the power of kindness is infinite. Let's all remember to reach out to others, to lend a hand when we can, and to never underestimate the impact of one simple act of love. Martha wiped away a tear as the crowd erupted into applause. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Not the applause, not the attention, but the feeling of knowing that she had helped make the world a little bit better. After the speech, she took the microphone and walked up to the stage. Her voice was steady, but her heart was full. "Thank you all," she began, her voice carrying through the crowd. "I never thought I'd be standing here today, but here I am, surrounded by all of you. You've given me so much, and I promise I will never forget it. My story is just one of many, and I want each of you to know that your story matters too. We all have something to give. And together, we can create a world where no one feels invisible." The crowd cheered, and Martha stepped back from the microphone, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As the years passed, Martha continued to live a life full of purpose. She volunteered at the local senior center, helped organize community events, and kept in touch with everyone who had touched her life. But the real change had come from within. She had learned that it wasn't just the big gestures that mattered, it was the little things. The smile from a stranger. The kind word. The simple act of showing up when someone needed you. One day, as Martha was walking through the park, she bumped into an elderly man sitting alone on a bench. His eyes were distant, filled with the kind of sadness Martha had once known all too well. She sat down beside him and smiled. "Hi there," she said gently. "I'm Martha." He looked at her, surprised at first, but then smiled back. "I'm Walter." Martha nodded. "It's nice to meet you, Walter. Are you new here?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Just moved to town. My wife passed away a year ago. I don't know anyone here." Martha placed a hand on his arm. "Well, Walter, you do now." And in that moment, she knew her journey was far from over. The kindness she had received would always be a part of her. And now, she had the chance to give that same kindness to someone else. As the sun set over the small town, Martha walked home, her heart full. She didn't need to be famous. She didn't need recognition. She had found her peace in the love she had given, and the love she had received. And that, she realized, was all she had ever really needed. Martha Jenkins wasn't just a woman who had survived grief. She was a woman who had found a new beginning, a beginning built on the strength of community, the power of kindness, and the simple truth that we are never truly alone. And as she stepped into her home that evening, Martha knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.